The bandwidth for this episode of the AR-15 podcast is sponsored by the Firearms Radio Network. FirearmsRadio.tv.
Welcome to episode number 78 of the AR-15 podcast as I sit here and stumble with my recording equipment. I'm your host, Reed Snyder, and with me today are J.W. Ramp and Anthony Hardy, giving me a lot of support there in the background from the Peanut Gallery. This is the podcast about your favorite black rifle. The show is for you whether you're building your first AR or you've been building ARs for years. There is something we can all do to take our black rifle to the next level. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
Fabulous.
Oh, I think we're in rare shape.
Well, that is outstanding. I mean, I can tell you for sure that I'm over here trying to do my best and blundering around about it the whole way.
And we're just pointing out every little misstep that you make.
And, you know, that's why I love you guys. So
it's the most fun in the world. You give us a lot of material, and I'm usually on the receiving end. It's very rare I get to be on the giving end. So,
well, you know, I try. I really try. I want to make it enjoyable for everybody.
We appreciate it.
Well, so we want to let everybody know that Brownells helps make this show possible. So don't forget
this
the
show
Brownells.
right here, this specific show.
Absolutely.
Which is what number? 78.
It is 78.
78.
So don't forget the Brownells is there for you anytime you make a mistake, like when Jake shoots a takedown pin detent across his avocado green linoleum flooring, and it skids under the cabinets. So with that in mind, I want to show the listeners here what we have been up to the last 2 weeks.
This is when the light from the heavens shines down.
And what we have here is our Seekins precision lower with our Bravo Company Manufacturing Mod 1, Mod 0 handguard, or grip, and the Colt lower receiver parts kit components that are required, as well as our ALG Defense ACT AR-15 trigger set. We've put links in the show notes to tell you what we have in the build so far, so you can look at them yourself and get a feel for what we're talking about. But really, if you want to see the majesty and beauty of this lower, you're going to have to go to YouTube and check out the video.
Yes. Now, Reed, can you show us any of the trigger there?
I can. The trigger is right here. Now, if you want to see the guts, there is our ALG Defense trigger and hammer and disconnector. Now, I'm going to remind the listeners never to pull the trigger on their newly assembled fire control group in the lower receiver, because
kittens will weep.
You may just snap your bolt catch, or you could even potentially damage the aluminum between your trigger housing area and your mag well. So there is the hammer. You'll notice that we've got a nickel boron and a nickel Teflon coated set of pieces there.
It's pretty.
It is very pretty, and it is very crisp, and it is all within a very tight set of military specifications. And ALG, being a division of Geisley, puts all of their knowledge and technology behind their components, as we have all come to expect with Geisley, in every ALG component. So this, my friends, is an outstanding start to this build.
Now, looking at that parts kit, it says that it comes with the AccuWedge.
It does.
Did you use that? What is that?
The AccuWedge is just a little piece of plastic that fits right under the rear takedown pin. Now, in our case, we're not going to need that because, as you see the light reflected off, there is a screw that can be adjusted to take up the slack that's in your upper and lower receivers that is going to do the exact same job as that AccuWedge.
Can you
Okay.
point out
So
that screw for our viewers there, Reed?
It is right in the middle of the receiver below that takedown pin, and you
It's
can
just, you
see
see a
it
little shiny spot,
reflecting
guys.
right
so,
there.
so that just kind of pushes up against like the bosses that hang down from the upper.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Takes up that space in there and allows for a little more stable mate between the two. So, all outstanding stuff.
Now, other than the trigger guard, are there any other parts that you had left over that didn't really get used?
Yes, the bolt release is part of the Seekins assembly.
Okay.
So that is not a standard bolt release, and it is an ambidextrous bolt release, so you will see on the back side a counter component there that allows you to release the bolt from the opposite side of the rifle.
Perfect.
So I think for a lefty, it's pretty much useless, but for a right-handed shooter, you have your mag release and your bolt release all under your finger. So I guess if you were going to go out and shoot, that might be convenient. But for a lefty, it doesn't mean anything to me. Nothing. I'm coming up empty on that. No. But I do use my thumb around the mag well, so that does have some bearing on the way I use a rifle.
There you go.
But, just an outstanding start. We're real excited about that. And, of course, Brownells sponsoring that giveaway has just been very gracious and generous. So we want you to go and look at their website if you want to take a look at the parts that we're putting together. And remember to shop for your AR-15 parts at Brownells. And you can go to ar15podcast.com/parts to help out the show and buy your stuff from Brownells. So, a couple of rifle assembly tips for the week. So I want to kind of go over these things with you. I think probably first and foremost, the thing we need to talk about is the magazine release. I have always kind of felt that was the first thing that needs to be put in your build. And here's why. When you put your bolt catch on there, it's real hard to spin your mag release around without catching on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it just a bit of a booger to try to get done. In this case, we had Seekins bolt catch on there, and it was secured with a threaded pin, so it comes out with an Allen wrench, and so it's a little different from what you would normally see in a build. But, I did have to remove it before I could put my mag release on there. As far as the bolt catch, that's the one where you're drifting in that pin, and you're always going to find yourself boogering up the side of your lower. I didn't have that in this case, so no worries for the potential winner, but if you want to avoid that, there's two things that I have come to learn. The first is painter's tape is your friend, and the second is Brownells actually makes a custom pin punch to drift that pin in and provide the least possibility of damaging your lower receiver. So we will touch on that later.
Hey, Reed, can I stop you real quick? I just
Sure.
thought about this. We may have some listeners that are just coming into the show that haven't seen or heard the last few episodes that don't know about our giveaway.
Well, you know what? That's a good point.
Did not think of that.
What do you want to tell them?
I can see if I can stumble through it. Guys, we are giving away an AR-15, custom-built AR-15. All the parts are provided by Brownells. So this is some really high quality parts. We actually have, let's see, which episode was that we went through all that, guys? It's episode 75. So if you want to hear all the nitty gritty details about all the parts and pieces, go back and take a listen to or even watch episode 75. Reed does quite a bit of really good show and tell for us. And if you want to enter that giveaway, that actually, let's see, where are the details on this guy? Do y'all remember? We opened up the giveaway on June 1st, wasn't it?
June.
Yep.
And
there's three ways to enter.
Yes.
You can go to AR-15.com, AR-15podcast.com/winner to get into the Firearms Radio Network mailing list. You can go to iTunes and leave written feedback, or you can go to Stitcher and leave written feedback. All of those will provide us with your information to enter you into the giveaway. And if you go to all three places, you will get 3 entries.
Woohoo! So the other part to that is, if I remember correctly, one of the reasons that we have this is this was all Reed's idea, and he said, you know, we go online and you look around, especially if you're a fairly new into AR-15s and you're trying to find some really good instructions on how to put your AR-15 together. And I experienced the same thing that Reed was talking about, looking at changing out some parts on my existing build, and I go, well, it tells me to do this, this, and this, and the guy shows me how to do it, but he doesn't show me what actually went wrong, because there's all kinds of things that don't quite go right, and you know, you end up with something not right here, and oh, I need this part for that. And Reed is doing a nice little, we call it, what, a shadow box or something, Reed? You're going to record all the build, and I guess you've already started that process.
Right. And so we're going to try to go over all of the details so that you guys can have a better understanding of the things that you're really going to face, because even as many ARs as I've built, I am still coming up against the same demons when I am putting this one together. So let's...
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but keep
No, that's all right. But you brought a good point. You know, the magazine release is relatively easy to put in because you're just mating what is essentially a nut and a bolt. The nut is the button with a threaded hole in it, and the bolt is your actual mag release, which is going to screw into it. But the bolt catch, we talked about the difficulty there, because marring the side while you're drifting in a pin is really kind of a bummer, because now you've got a permanently custom marked lower receiver. But the next 3 parts, your fire control group, they're the ones that I think a lot of people have some difficulty with, because it is not necessarily intuitive how they all go together. And
Lining that spring up can get kind of fancy.
yeah. And you know, here's the thing. You've got a safety selector, and it's going to have a detent, and it's going to have a spring that are on the bottom of your receiver coming out right above your grip. And your grip is going to be a hole that's going to hold that spring. And so in order to secure those parts, what you have to do is take your grip, put the spring in it, put your detent in your lower, and put your safety selector in your lower, and kind of hold all 4 of those pieces in stasis while you're trying to mate them together and not bend the snot out of your spring. So it just takes a little bit of time, kind of pre-fitting everything, getting an understanding of how it's going to line up, and just being slow and steady will get you there. And once you get that done, the next thing is trying to get your grip bolt to line up with the little bitty hole at the bottom of a very dark well that you can't see and can't reach your fingers down into, with a straight edge screwdriver. So that's kind of difficult. I like the grip screws that have an Allen wrench, a hex head on them, because then you just put your hex bit in it and kind of hold it upside down, and that thing will sit on that all day long. You don't have to monkey with it. But when I put my fire control groups together, I always put my safety selector in first. And I have come to the realization that if you tilt your trigger into the well without the disconnector on it and have the back of it bottom out, that you can kind of scoot it back under your safety selector and have the front of your trigger drop through the hole at the bottom of your receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do that rather than put that in and then put the safety selector in, because for me it's a little easier.
Yeah, and if you've got some sort of aftermarket trigger like a Timney, or I guess one of those fancy new ones that everybody seems to be blogging about with the TacCon or the 3MR or whatever,
Right.
That's like an all-in-one drop-in,
Yeah.
you're going to have to take that safety selector out, or if it's your first build, you're going to have to put the trigger in first, because you really just can't jam those down in past the safety selector.
And you know, the whole thing about the safety selector is that it's basically cut in a very specific way around the barrel of the safety selector, so that trigger bar can kind of fit in a way where in one position it'll move, and in another position it'll be prevented from moving to a point where it can release the hammer, the sear on the hammer. But you know, JW is right on those bigger pieces. There's just kind of no way to rotate the whole of that assembly around that barrel and make it work. And so the good part of that is that in putting those in, since it's kind of a unibody system, you don't have the multi-steps that you do in the trigger and disconnector and hammer assembly, throwing the pins in there. You drop it in, you put in 2 pins, you're done. But I always like to put the safety selector in, and I don't know why. I think it's just that in that sense I feel a little more comfortable with the build as far as the assembly sequence.
And you're going to have to get the grip on right after that too, right, to keep everything in?
Exactly. So, and I guess with the grip, for me it makes it easier to just maneuver the whole thing, because throwing those pins into your through your trigger and disconnector and into your hammer, just for me it's a little difficult, because you're basically having to force that pin in. I think there is a point on the hammer where the center ridge, there's little cutouts on your pins, and there's a detent, I guess, that kind of stops that hammer pin from going all the way through in the middle. And I think there may be something in the no, I don't think there's anything in the trigger bar or the disconnector that does that, but it's just tough to wiggle those in there because they're under tension. They've got springs. They're trying to force them into a certain position, and that position is not lined up with the holes. So you have to force them into a position where they're lined up with the holes, keep them steady while you're drifting those pins in. But so it's kind of a balancing act. You're trying to get all these pieces to kind of go in together, and the only thing I can say that really is going to be helpful is take your time. Don't rush it. Take your time. Be deliberate, because if you try to be ham-fisted with it, you're gonna break something. You're gonna bend something. You're gonna make yourself really unhappy, and it's kind of hard to talk to customer service about how you need some service when you messed it up yourself.
Mm-hmm.
AR world is full of good people that'll take care of you, but sometimes you kind of have to pay for your own mistakes. So that's kind of how I do it. Obviously, everybody's got their own madness, their own methodology. Do what works best for you, but just take it easy, take it slow, one step at a time. It will all go together if you just kind of work the problem and be patient. So, rifle assembly tips for the week. Obviously, if any of you guys have anything to add, we'd love to hear it from you, and we'll put it in the show notes coming up. So, on to our main topic tonight. I guess it's kind of apropos for what we're talking about, but since we're building a rifle, I thought we ought to talk about the tools that we need to build a rifle. So, let's start off with the biggest tool, you need a workbench. Do you guys have workbenches?
Of a sort, yeah.
I've got a homemade workbench.
Yep.
It's just 2x4s and 4x4s. It's sitting in the garage. It's nice and steady. It's nice and level. And you know what? It serves a purpose. If you
I'm
want to
I'm
go out
going through a move actually. I'm moving into a new house here at
cool.
the end of the month, and so that's been definitely a topic of conversation. Is where's the guns gonna go, and where's the reloading setup gonna go, and so been doing some thinking about that.
Is there conversation, or is this like an internal dialogue?
Oh no, there's conversation. Got a very
Now, is this the conversation that says, "Darn it, I don't want it in the living room. You're gonna hide it in the back. I want guests to come over." That's what I got.
The biggest thing that I've been trying to decide is keeping the guns with the reloading and the rest of it, and I'm actually thinking of doing kind of a split and having the reloading in the garage where it isn't necessarily so secure, and then having the office be fairly firearms heavy. So
I see. Well, we'll know to go in through the garage. I think the next big piece is going to be a bench vise. I think mine is a Craftsman. It's a good sized vise, and I don't know that you need any one size over another. Mine has a pretty good span on the jaw, so I could, chuck up pretty much anything I needed to in that vise. But obviously, whatever you can fit into your workspace, I think is adequate as long as it has the ability to clamp down on your work and really get a bite on it and hold on to what you need it to.
And to be able to put it onto something solid. If your workbench is just kind of a couple of sawhorses, then getting your vise on something a little more solid would definitely help you out.
And and my vise is actually bolted through the bench, so wherever the vise is going, that bench is going too. I think that the bulk of AR aficionados, whether you have built a rifle or are planning to build a rifle, you have seen an upper receiver action block and a lower receiver vice block. These
right.
are kind of
you're not going to screw your receiver straight into that vise. We need something to actually grip onto that's made to interface with those receivers. And there's some choices out there, but they're all pretty much built on the same concept.
Right.
When you're talking about your lower receiver vice block, it's basically a magazine simulator. And then the upper receiver, I don't know, how would you describe that?
It's a clamshell with a hollow void space for your what do you call it? Your dust cover, your forward assist, and pretty much everything I've seen will handle either the A2 upper receiver with a handle or a flat top upper receiver with the Picatinny rail. So it just basically has a hinge on it, and you lay it on one side, and the other side comes down, and you check it up in your block or your vise, and it's holding on to it. All of the ones I've seen have a chunk of material that it looks like it's shaped in the shape of the bolt carrier void in your upper receiver, so it goes through the back where your buffer tube is assembled. Your what do you call it? Your lower. It's your buffer. No, what is it called? Receiver extension.
It's where your bolt carrier group slides in.
Yeah, but it's called the receiver extension.
Okay.
Sorry, I just had passed a little brain gas there. Anyways, so that kind of helps maintain the shape of your upper receiver, make sure that you don't have any deformation. But it's essentially the tried and true way to start with this part of assembly. I think the next big component is going to be your armorer's wrench. it's going to be the tool that will assist with tightening down your barrel nut. It has a connection point for a torque wrench. It has a space for you to tighten down the flash hider, most standard flash hiders. Many of them have a castle nut tool. The one that we put a link into the show notes does not. I think that is. Oh, it also has pins for a number of the gas blocks that are designed around it's a different format that those pins are needed to actually grip onto. So that is an important part of assembling your upper receiver. I think that the next two pieces are really kind of a combo set, and that would be a good hammer and roll pin punches. There are a number of roll pins that are going to need to be assembled on most standard rifles. You've got one for the bolt catch, you've got one for your gas tube, you've got one for your trigger guard. Let's see, help me out, guys. Are there any more where you're going to need to drift a pin in? All right, well, if anybody remembers something I forgot, let me know. It's okay, I can take it. But I think those are the three ones that always come up for me. Let's see.
You mentioned the trigger pins?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those ones can kind of go in by hand, but it's really nice to have a pin or a punch of some sort kind of holding everything in place while you slide them in. So,
you know, the front detent, for the longest time, what I would do is I would put a roll pin punch or a pin punch through there that was the same diameter as my front
takedown
pin, the pivot pin there. And so I'd put my spring and my detent, force it in with a fingernail, and slide that pin from the outside over the hole so that I could feed the pivot pin in from its proper side, pushing that back. All the while I've captured my pin and my spring. Now there's another tool we'll talk about that kind of takes care of that. But that was the way I used to do it. So, you know, the punches are really important. Roll pin punches help you with the roll pins because they have a divot on it, and it keeps the head of that pin punch right centered on that pin so it's not deflecting into the side of your work and marring it. Let's see, the last tool on here is the one that I think is probably the most common tool you're going to need that it has only one single purpose, and that's a torque wrench. You're going to have to torque your barrel nut, whatever flavor of barrel nut you have, it is going to have to be torqued down to a given spec. And at a minimum, I have seen 30 foot-pounds, and from that kind of baseline, I've seen custom instructions or specific instructions for various other manufacturers' handguards or barrel nuts, and so obviously if they've given you instructions, you need to follow those, but I think as a rule of thumb, putting 30 foot-pounds of torque on there and then indexing the barrel nut to the next slot for your gas tube is pretty much the standard approach that most people take to putting a barrel on an upper.
Yeah, and you're going to find other uses for that torque wrench too. I mean, there's the castle nut for the buffer tube. If you're doing a precision build, you might have a torque wrench that would let you like chuck up a bit basically to get your scope rings torqued down properly. It's just kind of going to depend on the range of adjustment that your torque wrench will give you.
Now I've got a Wheeler torque wrench, which I guess you'd call it a torque wrench, but it's measured in what is it, inch pounds? Is that right? Inch pounds?
Yeah.
And it's for site assemblies, and
Yep.
so it's it's like a little mini hand drill, but it's just a holder for your bits, and I use one of those, but my torque wrench is very rudimentary. It doesn't have the whole set it and pull until it clicks. It has the flexing piece of steel that comes off on a gauge, and when I torqued it to the right amount, my steel rod is pointing at the place on the indicator where it is. So that's
right. The torque wrenches that you're installing, the things on the receivers, is going to be kind of a different scale than the refined ones on the rings.
So I think that those are the major tools you're going to need. And kind of just thinking this through with all the things that I've done, these are the things that I went to first when I started building them, and that were typically enough to get me through most projects. But there are a bunch of tools that make it easier to do this, and so we're going to go through that now. So we talked about roll pin punches, but those are typically a roll pin punch with a good 1.5 inches of steel on the punch, and as Anthony will tell you,
yep.
the roll pin punches can bend and deflect when you put enough force on them, trying to get pins to move. So,
and for those of you that are video listeners, he's going to show you exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Point in case, when I was taking the A2 sight, fixed front sight off my my AR, I used some of these to get the pins out, and I don't remember exactly which one I used.
Metallurgy that you're dealing with there?
Yeah, they are. Let's see. These are actually specifically made to pull out those kinds of pins. They are. It's drop force and heated treated steel. So this is not cheap stuff. This is a nice little set of punches that I bought just for this. They've got the little rounded tip on the end so that you don't bend the pin, so it can reach, seat inside that little hole properly, so you don't actually bend the pin in. And for those of you, if you can see this. When I spin this around, you can see this one's nicely bent, and that's me trying to straighten it out. It was actually worse than that. And then here's another. If you can see how that was, originally they were all nice and straight, and this one you can see is more like a curving river. For those of you that are on video, so yeah, they're nice. They're nice punches, and it was not a really cheap set, but that was just from one job. So yeah, what Reed's going to tell you about for those little roll pin starter punches is a tip that I wish I had. For sure.
Now, this is a roll pin starter punch, and you can see as it's highlighted against my forehead that it is a much shorter stem there, and so much less likely to be bent. You're going to be able to apply much more force to the punch to get whatever you're working on started, and when you really get it moving, you've done half of what you need to get done. So you're a lot of the way there in your struggle.
Yeah, that's probably what the thin part of that's probably what 1/2 inch long versus inch and a half on mine.
Exactly. You're putting a lot of force in there if you're going to hit it with a hammer pretty significantly, and too much of that tip there, and it's going to bend.
Yep. I mean, whenever you're getting some of those pins out, I mean, you're putting it against an extremely hard surface, and you're whacking the mess out of it. So, yeah, those would have been invaluable to have.
Well, and think about it. When you assemble a rifle, when you get it out and you start doing things, the rifle is going to torque, it's going to bend, it's going to kind of find its natural shape, and sometimes pins get bound up. Sometimes there's fouling on them. Just things happen. I've seen a gas block that probably wasn't milled the way it needed to be, and so a lot of gas was spilling out around the gas tube, and it was fouling the entire channel that it was in, as well as the channel that your gas or your roll pin was in. So I'm sure that carbon buildup, and that's probably as hot as the gas is going to get right there at that port as it's coming out, and so it was a little gunked up. The next tool that I think makes it easier are these roll pin holders. You know, I learned a trick where you basically fold a piece of masking tape over the end of your tool and you connect your roll pin to it. So you've got a piece of masking tape holding it instead of my big ham-fisted fingers. And so I've had fewer hammer blows hit my fingers, and I've had more success with my roll pins. But these roll pin holders actually have a void in the end of the pin, and it holds the pin for you while you tap on it and seat it. So no more trying to hold a quarter-inch long pin and drive it in a tiny, tiny hole.
Yeah, and if you guys go over to the Brownells website, they actually have a nice little video. If you click on the link in the show notes, they have a nice little video on how those work, and it really does look extraordinarily useful. And they're not expensive, so.
No. Now here's another thing, a bolt catch pin punch. I have talked ad nauseum about drifting in the bolt catch pin and marring the side of your work, and this pin punch has a flat side so that it can get right in line with your pin and it can get right up next to your receiver, and you don't have to strike that pin at an odd angle. I think it's ingenious. It's a great little tool, and it does make that part of it much easier. We talked about the upper receiver action block. What I have moved to is the Geisley reaction rod.
Yeah, and while we're here, I might as well just hop down to some of our feedback here and kind of point this one to Ian K. He brought this right up here when he emailed us. He said, hey, great job with episode 77 with Michael. One of the highlights was knowing how Reed must have been filling with pride as he cast aside that newfangled ACOG to introduce and instruct young Marines on the proper use of the archaic iron sights. If I may, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask a small favor of you. Now that you're getting into the Brownells build, you'll be discussing the tools needed and recommended for each assembly. Yes, we will. He said, let's all of us clear-thinking individuals take a stand here and now and agree to eliminate and never again mention the horribly ineffective and poorly designed upper receiver action block that many builders have had to suffer with for decades. Kind of like the first tool we mentioned. He said, now that we have the Geisley reaction rod and similar quality products from Brownells, there is no reason to ever go back again. For those new builders, I'll let you describe the simple genius behind securing the upper receiver at the barrel extension, as opposed to crushing the entire aluminum upper in a bench vise, then fighting it as it slips and shifts while trying to torque down the barrel nut at the same time. Please spread the capital G gospel. Love the show, guys, and thanks again. Now if I could just figure out how to fit this ACOG to my M1 Garand. Well, yeah, Ian brings up a great point. The upper receiver action block is not the only solution to the installation of the barrel nut.
And I use the Geisley reaction rod. Brownells sells a receiver extension torque tool, which basically accomplishes the same goal. The point is this: the aluminum is a more ductile, malleable material than your steel. And you can torque down your steel barrel nut on your steel barrel, and the forces at bay have the potential, should you get out of hand, of basically twisting your upper receiver. And obviously, when that happens, there's no going back. You have a paperweight. So, I think the reaction rod from Geisley, the torque tool from Brownells, as alternatives are wonderful options. And what they do is seat in the barrel extension in the same spaces that your bolt aligns through as it comes home into battery. And that is a very sound connection point. It's a steel on steel. The barrel extension is very, very I guess, tightly attached to the barrel, so there's not any real likelihood of the forces that you can bring to bear having any impact on them. I think the torque on the barrel and the barrel extension is somewhere around 150 to 180 foot-pounds, and I don't know if you could physically put that much torque on it. I think you would have to have a machine. But in any case, so I really think that it is a way to attach your barrel to your receiver and put a flash hider or a brake on your barrel with the least amount of risk of damage to your upper receiver.
And the Geisley and the Brownells rods kind of work in opposite fashions. The Geisley, you actually chuck it up in your vise, and then you slide everything onto it, whereas the Brownells one, you chuck up your
wrench.
Right, your armorer's wrench or whatever you want to call it. You put that in the vise, and then you kind of drop everything down into it, and then the reaction rod from Brownells actually has the torque bit on it that you interface with, and so that's what you're applying the torque to.
Right.
So they're just kind of backwards from each other.
So I think either way, you're going to be fine. It's just a matter of whatever your preference is. I think the next piece is something that really caused me the greatest amount of consternation until I actually got it. But there are ways of working around it. The next tool that makes it easier is a barrel nut alignment gauge. Basically, it fits right in the hole of your gas key. You torque your barrel nut up to wherever you think it needs to be for alignment. You pull it off your holding tool. You put your bolt carrier group inside the upper receiver, and as it slides towards battery, if your barrel nut's out of alignment, it is going to stop because of that gauge. As soon as it is properly aligned, the gauge will pass right through the open space, and it'll go into battery, and you're done. And doing it the old-fashioned way was to tighten it up and then mount your gas tube and see if the bolt would close. And after a few times of trying to figure out that your gas tube and your bolt weren't lining up, you'd have to pull it all apart again and do it just a little bit more. And so it's a much easier way, I think. Then I guess the last piece is a stock wrench, and while it may be a part of the armorer's wrench that you get, if it isn't, it is a tool that is important. So the stock wrench, we just kind of threw it in here for lack of a better place to put it, but it is important, and it is something that you should get for your next build if you don't already have one. So we've got 3 special use tools that I think are worth mentioning simply because of what I've seen in all of the builds I've done. The first are snap ring pliers. Now, if you're putting together a rifle that has a delta ring and the delta spring and the little snap ring, you understand, if you've done it before, how difficult it is to get that ring on there to secure that assembly. It all goes onto the barrel nut, and there's a little groove that snap ring attaches into to keep the whole assembly in place, and that's a pretty good solid piece of steel, and I don't know too many ways of getting it on there easily without basically having to risk your digits and bend a couple of screwdrivers and potentially mar your work trying to get at it. So the snap ring pliers are just real easy. You got 2 holes in that snap ring, you torque your pliers open and fit it over, and you're done. On top of that, I've seen the snap ring connections on other firearms. my Benelli M4 has a snap ring piece on the end of the what do you call it, the magazine. So it came in handy there, and every once in a while you see that attachment, the snap ring, on other items in the world, and so it's always nice to have the tool available when you need it. The next one that I think is a special use tool that might be worth getting is the carrier key staking tool. And I say this because the number of gas keys that you're going to find that are properly staked as opposed to improperly staked is probably inversely proportional to the price you pay for it. So the higher the price, the fewer bad ones you'll find. The lower the price, the more bad ones you'll find. And it's not that the bolt carrier group isn't going to work. It's that sometimes to get lower prices, they're cutting corners. And so to have this tool allows you to not only service a gas key if you need to, take it off, replace it, or tighten it and resecure it, but it allows you to make sure that if you buy a bolt carrier group that is not properly staked, that you can properly stake it before you begin to rely on it in earnest. Now, is it necessary? No. Do you need it? Maybe, maybe not. But it's there. I think it's a good special use tool to have. And I think
couple of these things are kind of like if you've got a shop where you're putting together a bunch of these, there's some developments that really make things a lot easier. Mm-hmm. If you're just putting together one, maybe two builds, cost might be a little prohibitive, and you could probably DIY your way through a couple of these problems.
Right. But it's all a matter of where you want to be on it. I don't have a carrier key staking tool. I don't have a bolt ejector tool, but I have snap ring pliers, and that's only because I've torn my fingers up trying to put a few of those on. So I thought that was a good buy. The last piece is a bolt ejector tool. It basically allows you to disassemble your bolt. Now, the only reason I want one is so that when I'm basically using my go and no-go gauges and my field gauges, I've got my bolt stripped to where it needs to be for the testing. Otherwise, I've never stripped a bolt to clean it. I don't know if that's folly or not, but I've never had my ejector pin be the problem of anything related to any of my builds. And when it becomes the problem, then I'll start cleaning it and I'll get myself an ejector tool. But I think that's really kind of it on the obscure side of custom tools for the AR. I'm sure there's others, but that's kind of the three highlights I know. What about things that you wouldn't have thought you needed?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of went over all the tools as far as some of the extra supplies, things you might want to have on hand. We kind of already hinted at painter's tape or even electrical tape, something that holds up pretty well, doesn't leave a bunch of nasty residue, and that you can actually get stuck or wrapped around the aluminum of your receivers, especially for driving in those pins. Even if you got a fancy punch and a pin holder and all of that, sometimes you make a mistake, and it's nice to dig that pin into a piece of tape rather than a nice brand new shiny receiver.
Yeah. And the thing that I always hear mentioned, and I've never had it happen, is to get yourself either some machine oil or anti-seizing grease or something that will prevent seizing or galling, simply because on the parts or the components you're going to have some threading, basically your barrel nut. you'd hate to think that you're gonna, booger up the threads, or that you're going to cross-thread it, or something horrible is going to happen to it, because once again, at that point, you've just made your upper receiver a paperweight. So better safe than sorry. And I think you can get a tube of this that will probably last you for centuries for $2 at any auto hardware store. But I think that covers the standard toolbox you ought to have if you want to build an AR, plus some extras that are really nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if anything else comes to mind as far as little widgets I have lying around on the workbench that comes in handy. I know those black neoprene work mats with like the exploded 1911 and AR and stuff. Those are great for working on, but they're black. And all the parts in my AR are black, and they're small. So whenever I'm working on something like that, I lay down just white towels, basically, just paper towels.
I've got a green,
so I can see everything contrasting.
I've got a green mat that's a Brownells mat.
Ooh, maybe that's the solution. Black is nice and tactical, but
but green.
Is it avocado lime green?
No. This is like accountant shade green.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like poker table felt green. And there's another custom tool that I thought I should mention that I just recalled.
Uh-oh. Reed is walking away from the microphone. He's reaching into a bag.
This is the pivot pin detent installation tool. This is an invaluable tool for preventing exactly what Jake always laments at the beginning of the show: shooting his pins across the floor. So I'm going to put this in the show notes, but what this does is allow you to install that whole spring and pin assembly with the least amount of fuss, and it's an ingenious tool. It is an ingenious tool. Let me just kind of, I'll wait. Go to the show notes, click on the link, and you'll find this tool. It is brilliant. But guys, I think that's it.
Yeah, this was one of those shows where having the notes open in front of you is definitely helpful, because I know there's roll pin starter punch, roll pin holder, bolt catch pin punch. There's all these words, and I get mixed up with them. So Reed really takes his time linking everything together, and it's nice. You can just click right over to Brownells and see what we're talking about. Maybe I should have mentioned that before we got started talking, but now you know for next time.
Well, and you know what? Definitely go to the AR-15 podcast and use the link there to Brownells, because once again, through the Firearms Radio Network, the AR-15 podcast is allowed, given the opportunity to give you guys everything that you want to know about ARs. So we want to give you an opportunity to keep it going strong, and that's the best way right now. So all that being said, I think that we've pretty much kind of buttoned all this up. Guys, thoughts?
I'm just excited to see the actual putting together videos when those get to come out. I'm really excited, guys. I think you're gonna really like them.
Yeah, well, I'm at the point where I'm having to get the equipment I have in place evaluated for worthiness. I've got an old Canon digital, video recorder. I might have to go with what do they call it, a GoPro?
There you go.
You'll see. Anyways,
just make sure you get a manicure.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Let's get into the feedback.
All right. Well, why don't you start with Chris W., Anthony, and lead us
You
into the
bet.
beginning here.
You bet. All right, so Chris W. writes in. He says, "Hey guys, love the show. I just want to revise a question I had sent in earlier in the week. I'm trying to decide where to get a barrel for my 300 Blackout short barrel rifle build. I want to get a quality barrel, but I don't know what to look for. I've heard the benefits of chrome lining and nitride lining, but I don't know what a reasonable price is because Aero Precision is selling an 8-inch Cormova barrel for $210, but the 9-inch barrel from AAC that has a nitride coating and installed gas block is $425. That seems like a crazy price compared to the Aero one. Maybe it isn't. Being a newbie to the industry, I would love to hear some more experienced guys on what to do for a barrel. I want quality, but I'm on a fairly tight budget. What's a good compromise? I'd rather spend a little more if it's going to last a lot longer for me. Any help is appreciated, and thanks so much for the awesome giveaway." We'll stop there and answer the other question after we finish the first question. So let's start with that one, guys.
JW?
So I went the AAC route. I got the finished upper from them, so I didn't have to monkey around with anything, and it was just kind of ready to go. I figured they developed the cartridge. They probably knew how to put a rifle together. But that being said, I'm sure you pay a premium for that name and for that development cycle that they so graciously opened up and got the SAMI specs spread around the industry for. Gun industry politics kind of aside, I'm not really sure how long they are for the world or whether they're getting bundled up into Remington or what the whole deal is, but I'm sure there's some deals to be had out there. The Blackout cartridge has really exploded, and so it's very common for you to see Blackout uppers alongside 223 uppers when you're shopping around. I know, Reed, you get pretty fancy about your barrel coatings and things like that. What are the buzzwords that you're looking for when you're shopping around for a barrel?
You know, when I'm looking for a barrel, I'm concerned with what it's made from, how it's treated, and how it's rifled. The problem that I have is that I don't know what Aero Precision is putting into the rifle based on the question. And so without knowing what he's got going on, I can't really offer a clear answer. But here's what I can tell you. I have an 18-inch barrel from Daniel Defense that is a cold hammer forged, which is something I look for, and it is nitride coated. It is a pretty standard, I believe it's the chromoly vanadium steel, and if I recall right, I paid $289 for it. Now, I think that AAC's barrel is probably in line with that quality. Don't know about the rifling. But I would say $425 is a little high.
Yep, and looking at the Aero Precision one, it looks like a great barrel. Obviously, you're going to have to add the gas block and the gas tube and all that, the other kind of accoutrements that the AAC comes with. So, I mean, that could be a good thing. It could let you customize it with exactly what you want, but you're going to have to add that to the price. When we're talking about an 8 or a 9-inch SBR, the intricacies of long-range accuracy aren't really going to be showing up because it is such a short barrel. So I think kind of shaving a couple corners, not necessarily cutting them off completely, but kind of shaving some things really isn't going to hurt your performance that much when you're dealing with such a short barrel.
Right. Well, and you know, when you mention it, I mean, really, if you add, because doesn't AAC come with a gas block and a gas tube?
I assume so.
So, I mean, you're looking at anywhere from, what, $70 to $100 on top of what you're going to do with your Aero Precision. So, I mean, you know, you're narrowing the gap price-wise.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think really when you come down to it, AAC put the standard together, they drove it, and I think that they are basically relying on their experience in that regard to add credibility to the products that they put on the market. And,
Yeah, I just wouldn't be afraid of kind of looking at some of the other people.
Yeah, Aero Precision is a very good quality company. They make they started making aerospace parts, and so there's nothing that they can't do. So you just have to figure out where on that line you're going to be. That spectrum of things. But you pulled up two very good companies, and I think either choice would be a good one.
Now, the other thing he mentions at the end of his feedback is the giveaway that we're doing. Okay. He knows that you can leave a review on iTunes, through Stitcher, through the newsletter subscription. He's wondering if that gives him multiple entries or if it kind of gets shaken out and you only get one per person.
Nope, 3 entries.
3.
All right.
Yep, the magic number 3.
So go crazy with it.
Yeah.
Give Stitcher a try if you haven't before. Hop on over to iTunes. Make sure you're on the right podcast. But leave a review there. And the third one was AR15podcast.com/winner.
Winner.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's see. Damien writes, "Hi guys, I just found your show. I am building my first AR and was pleased to hear discussion on building one in your 75th episode."
Perfect. He can follow along with the show.
Yes.
I have a couple of newbie questions that I have not been able to answer yet. Do I have to worry about upper-lower pairing, dimensions, gaps, etc. from different manufacturers, or is this taken care of by the mil specs? Along the same lines, are there any other dimensions I should be watchful of while building and mixing parts? Let's talk about those two.
So the fitment of the upper to the lower, everything should work pretty well between different manufacturers. The things that you're going to see inconsistencies on are if you have specialized parts, whether it's a billet lower that has kind of some interesting contouring to it, and you might just kind of, like the line will just stop and it won't continue onto the specialized upper from that manufacturer.
Right.
But as far as fitting your takedown pins through it, I mean, there shouldn't be any issues.
No. So yeah, I mean, it's aesthetic. You're going to have an issue with your aesthetic when you're going to mix and match parts.
And as long as everything goes together and it's not too tight, if there's a little bit of a play, I mean, there's some other solutions out there, like we saw that little plastic piece from Colt. So, I mean, a little bit of wobble back and forth, you might see it when you're kind of bagged down, either on a bipod or something like that, where there's some play. But as far as accuracy effects when you're running around with your gun, I don't think that's going to show up much if you got a bit of play.
No. And you know what? It's to be expected. It's the way the rifle was designed. Let's see. Other dimensions you should be watchful of while building and mixing parts. You know, the only thing that comes to mind is your ramps, and we've talked about that. And it's basically not mixing the M4 feed ramps on an upper with a rifle 52-degree feed ramps on your rifle length barrel with a rifle barrel extension, because there's a potential for that little gap in the upper receiver catching the nose of your round. And, you know, your mileage may vary. That's what a lot of people have found fault with that combination with, and all the other combinations don't seem to have a problem. So
and then just kind of keeping consistent with your barrel length, whether it's a short barrel rifle like Chris is putting together, and you got like a pistol length gas system, or it's mid length or carbine length or rifle length. It's just got to be consistent.
Right. Let's see. Coatings. What episode did we go over coatings?
I'm looking right now. Hang on.
So see if you can find that, and let's move on to the next
episode
piece.
67.
All right. Damien, look at episode 67. That'll give you kind of a good start on a discussion about coatings. And if you have any more questions, send them in and we'll talk about them. He says, I always see a lot of reviews talking about budget builds, but could you do a good, better, and top-of-the-line comparison with reasoning? We did that one too, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Let's see. That was... which?
Says,
that was the budget.
Something about champagne?
Yeah. Episode 60.
Well,
was our champagne AR-15 on a beer budget. Well, we did the
No, we did a more recent one. It was the parts and pieces, didn't we?
We did that too, yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, that really gets into the nitty-gritty as far as what
new AR and
what you
what
should
to
prioritize.
upgrade. Yeah. I think it may have been, it was 66. Low, middle, high, iron sights, trigger, furniture.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I tell you what, Damien, here's the trouble. We cover that
almost every episode. Yeah.
So, listen to the entire back catalog and then come back. We'll answer any questions you have.
Just a small request of you. Just listen to everything, please.
All right. So, Damien,
no, but we really appreciate the new listeners. Obviously, that's huge. Thanks so much for finding us and for staying tuned. We are, I guess, not necessarily one of the few podcasts, but it's not every podcast that actually lists their entire library available for download. So we actually leave that up, and we continue paying for the bandwidth for all of it, and that's as a service to everybody that there's some good content there, and we'd love it for people to be able to reference it. So I guess the easiest way of getting to it is at firearmsradio.tv/iTunes. That'll give you the whole feed of the entire network. It's like a fire hose. And then on the side, it'll list the AR-15 podcast. So you can click on that, and it'll list all of our episodes.
All right. So the next one is something that I caught in my inbox, and I really kind of thought that this would be an interesting discussion. Robert W. says, Reed, I really enjoy your podcast. I work for an armored truck company and listen to the AR-15 podcast and other podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network using Dogcatcher, podcast aggregator for Android while working. But here's his question. He says, I just picked up a Black Rain lower for myself and a Phase 5 lower for my eldest 21-year-old son for a simultaneous build. My son will build his on a college student budget, and I will build my AR with a little more green. Do you have any suggestions to make it educational and fun? To me this is interesting, but my boys are very young, so they're not at an age where this is relevant to them. Guys, what do you think? I mean, how would you suggest how to make it educational and fun for a father-son team looking to do some builds?
Well, I think you can video the process and what you go through and just post it on YouTube would be kind of a fun thing to do if it's not a big deal to you to have yourself blunder through a few things. If you don't want to spend a lot of time editing.
I want to point out that Anthony is our IT guy. He goes straight to the IT stuff.
Yeah. I can't help it. That's what I do.
JW, any thoughts?
Well, I assume he's getting into it right now, and his son is back from college at home, and so they're able to do it together. If that's not the case, obviously going through things on Skype would be awesome if they're not right under the same roof. I realize that when we kind of blab on about things here is that if you can't see it, it's really tough to visualize some of these things. Mm-hmm. So using Skype and using Google Chat or whatever can really make it a lot easier to figure out, okay, which detent pin are you talking about?
I would say that one of the things that you need to do to make it educational as fun is to make sure that what you're doing is together. Take a class. If you can go to your community college and find a class that has something to do with gunsmithing, you could probably have some fun doing that. Going to gun shows, armed with some knowledge about what you're looking for, but browsing the tables for things that you could both acquire at the same time. I think that would be fun. There's a lot of material on the internet. I know that is it the American Gunsmithing Institute? You can buy courses from them, and they have courses on smithing with the AR. So there's some things you can do there. It's something that has never crossed my mind as a group project, more than a solo thing, and so I'm intrigued now because I look at this and I'm thinking, well, geez, my boys will be old enough one day to do this.
Yeah, and you see, kind of professionally, that I've seen some AK classes being put on. As far as you go, you show up and you actually fabricate an AK, and then you stick around and take a shooting class and learn how to shoot it. And so there's some really kind of unique opportunities out there as far as going through the build process, and then how much more rewarding that is to go and use what you just created to learn how to shoot it.
The internet is going to be your friend in this regard, but it's a tough thing you've asked, because it's really something that I think by and large I've never really thought about.
Sounds like fun, though. Looking forward to hearing how the build goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert, let us know what you guys come up with, and let us know how your builds go. We'd certainly
throw some photos up in the Flickr group, and we can see who gets the more votes or whatever as far as the Gucci build or the college ramen build.
There you go.
Nicely done.
All right, so who wants to take
I see one for Anthony here. It says, have you guys discussed, this is Rob L., he says, have you guys discussed using 45-degree offset backup irons with optics? Yes, I believe we have.
We have.
As I understand it, to use standard inline pop-up backup irons, you have to remove your optic or scope, and he asks, is a 45-degree offset is a better or more realistic alternative? Sorry if I missed this. So yeah, he's talking about, like, if you're using a magnified optic that actually hangs over the top of your backup irons, I think. Hopefully you'd have that optic on some sort of QD lever, and you could just pop it right off if it failed on you and flip up your irons. But if it's really clamped down there, like, there's really no point in having backup irons if they're underneath the scope, because you just can't get to them if it fails.
That's right.
If you're running a red dot of some sort, you should keep it a little further forward so that your irons have some room to pop up if they need to. But I guess the alternative to that is leaving the irons deployed all the time off to the side. Anthony, tell us about what you're running.
Yeah, so I actually have the GDT AR-15 45-degree offset sights, and I've got them on both my little 22, like a little Smith & Wesson M&P 1522 here, if you guys can.
Boom,
can see
there's
this.
a rifle.
Yep, there's a rifle. So we've got the both the offsets on the rear and the front, and they're really nice if you can kind of see that profile there, and it's got a little cheap red dot on there. And I got the same thing on my 223 on my Bushmaster, and it's the exact same set of sights. They're really, really inexpensive. I think they're about $30 or so, and they've actually held zero through a couple hundred rounds so far. So we'll see how long that continues to go. But like Reed says, are you throwing it down? Has it dropped on the floor yet? It's like, no, not yet. But we'll see how well they do. They're rated pretty good on Amazon, so we'll see how well they do. But and a lot of times these are used in 3-gun competitions specifically if you get into the better quality offset sights. So you can see those as a really good option for those kinds of areas where you need to do a really rapid transition and milliseconds matter when you're going from magnified to a closer up target. We talked in extensive, quite a bit more about this in episode 70 when we were just doing useful add-ons, and I talked a little bit about, and I think Reed gave me a lot of really good tips on it as well in episode 70, useful add-ons. So make sure you check that out for a lot more detail about that. But yeah, they're nice to have.
Well, Diamond Head, we saw at SHOT Show that Diamond Head has a set of sights that fold away under an optic and deploy sideways and out at an angle, and they will actually, go to rest and deploy without having to move that optic, even if it's hanging right on top of it, simply through the way they're engineered. So there's always that as an option, but there are some choices that are pretty innovative.
Cool.
So let's see. So Charles K. writes in, as I fly from Philly to Phoenix, I'm listening to episode 77 on Stitcher offline, and I wanted to give you some constructive feedback. He says, I love the show, but there's a lot of background noise in this episode. And it sounds like either strange breathing or stuff being slid across the countertop. It is very distracting. Thanks for a great show and great topics. I think Michael C. needs to upgrade his equipment. I'm going to reach out to him and let him know that he might want to...
He's going to have to tap into the Limitless Firearms Radio Network technology budget.
Right. Like we all have.
Make a couple purchases like we all have.
Yeah.
Well, except for Anthony, who's sitting there with the exact same setup.
Well, I designed this room for podcasting, so what can I say?
There you go.
Except for the lighting. Y'all don't get on me too hard about that.
Well, we'll let Michael see now, and thanks for the feedback, Charles. We really appreciate it. And, it's things like this that help us provide a better quality show for you guys, because we're on the great side of the equation, and we don't know anything that is going wrong. So if you let us know, we can fix it, and we'll make it better. We already talked about Ian K., so I guess that kind of does it for the evening, guys.
That closes it out.
So before we get into our outro...
Yeah, do you guys have anything planned for the coming week? Going to be shooting or anything like that?
I'm going to be going to a gunsmith. Going to have him do a little bit of work on the barrel. We're going to have it threaded, since it is basically a target crown on that. We're going to thread it so we can put a flash hider on it.
Awesome.
And then I guess I'm going to go and test some hardware that we've got, and we'll come back next week and let all the listeners know about some of these things.
Yeah, I gave a little listen to the podcast with Michael talking about different kit for the range and training classes and stuff like that. I've got a really exciting class coming up next week. I'm going to do a shoot house over in Ohio with EAG Tactical and Pat Rogers, some of those guys. And so in memory of Michael's kind of discussion, I decided to throw on the plate carrier for the interview. Always got to be prepared.
Yeah, I see that. That's good gear.
Cry or die, as a couple of my friends would say.
Anthony?
Yeah, unfortunately, the next couple of weeks I'm booked. So I spent last week, that's why I wasn't here last week, I was at the beach. So you guys can feel so sorry for me that I haven't had a chance to get behind my rifle, but yeah, I'm feeling refreshed and ready to go, so I'll do some catch-up work at work over the next couple of weeks, and then hopefully I can get back out to the range.
Now, wait a minute. I thought you said you were at a conference.
Yeah, it was a conference at the beach.
All right.
Actually, y'all don't even talk about it. I'm treasurer for the association, so I didn't get on the beach but for about 3 hours for in 5 days that I was there, so whatever. But still.
Yeah, I got too much sun this weekend. I saw the Blue Angels. They were awesome. But remember sunscreen, kids.
Yeah, always wear sunscreen. Well, let's go ahead and read out. I'll get us started here. So enter the AR-15 podcast rifle giveaway sponsored by Brownells by going to ar15podcast.com/winner. to join the Firearms Radio Network mailing list, which will enter you in the drawing. You can also enter the giveaway by leaving written feedback on iTunes and written feedback on Stitcher. Doing both of those will give you a second and a third chance of winning the drawing.
So that means all of our listeners can get 3 chances, and I can get how many, Reed?
No. None. 0, zip, zilch, 9, yet.
Dang it.
I just pulled it up to sign up. I wanted to see what was at the winner URL, and I tried signing up, and I guess I'm already subscribed.
All right, and we'll have to...
And ineligible.
Take you out of the eligibility side of it. You can send us any questions or comments to feedback@ar15podcast.com. I want to let you guys know that we read everything. I try to respond to a lot of it. Many times, if I don't respond to you same day or within a couple of days, it's because it's something good and juicy, and I'm going to put it up in the show notes. Have patience if I have overlooked something or something bounced back or it was a weird day on the internet. Send it to us again. We try our hardest to be real responsive.
And that's what really makes this valuable and rewarding for me. I know. I mean, sometimes it feels like we're just kind of talking out to a void, and when we get all this feedback, it's just great to hear from the listeners, and it really shapes the shows to come. So keep it coming.
Anthony?
Yeah, so you can also send us a recorded voicemail by using the SpeakPipe plugin that's on the right-hand side of the AR-15 podcast website. And I keep saying this: somebody out there in radio land, podcast land, YouTube land, wherever you happen to be listening to us, please use that and send us some voicemail through the SpeakPipe plugin. I'd love to be able to hear some actual audio feedback. That'd be awesome.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Do any of you know how to actually get that? Because I don't actually know the answer to that question. We may have 30 or 40 messages on there.
Oh Lord, I didn't think about that.
I think we
thought
need
it would come to you.
No, it's not me. It's above my pay grade. They'd have to give me the keys to the kingdom.
Well, I'll just have to dig into it and figure out where it's going then.
All right.
We can do that. All right. So, I'll lose my place.
Subscribe and listen.
Yes. If I can find I really have lost my place. This is sad.
All right.
Okay. I got you. Subscribe and listen to AR-15 podcast for free. Hear that? $0 at firearmsradio.tv/iTunes. You'll see all the wonderful feeds there from all the different podcasts, and you can get us too. So be sure to leave us an iTunes review, because not only does that leave us an iTunes review, which of course helps us help you, but it also enters you in the rifle giveaway, so don't forget that. And if you listen to us on the Stitcher app, be sure to leave us a review there, because once again, that's the second entry. And we talked earlier about going to ar15podcast.com/winner. Make sure you get a chance, all 3 chances to win your rifle, guys. It's a really nice rifle. And you can share your pics with us on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/black rifle. And we do love to get those pics, so make sure you post those up to us. And I'm going to toss it over to JW to take us all the way out.
Remember to follow us on Google Plus to watch us live on Monday nights, late into the evening, for those of us on the East Coast, at firearmsradio.tv/plus, over on YouTube at youtube.com/firearmsradio, where you can see an archive of our old shows and see what we're holding up in front of the camera. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/firearmsradio. Throughout the week, there'll be posts about shows and things coming up, and that's where you can also check out all the other podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network. We keep bringing up these guys because they're so good to us, so don't forget to use our Brownells affiliate link for all your AR-15 parts, and for anything that they don't have, click on one of the banners to Amazon on any of the firearmsradio.tv websites, and that'll take you over to everything else.
All right, well, guys, it's been a wonderful, great show tonight, and I hope, listeners, that this has helped you kind of get a grip on the kind of tools you're going to need, and maybe we've hinted at a tool that you thought you needed but didn't know how to find. I guess we'll get ready to talk to you guys next week about what we've got going on with our build.
Sounds great.
Have a good night.
Talk to you later, guys.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.